Oh, okay. Well, there's various things coming along here with this overpopulation issue. Okay. First of all, I know that part of the issue, because this is a very liberal dogma that you need to accept the overpopulation idea. And I think part of the problem is that some of those that deny the overpopulation is a problem are the Beethovens and brain police, who are more on this libertarian market anarchist side of things, right? And so some people, I don't think those two, but some people from that side of the aisle, when they're arguing against overpopulation, they're saying there's no problem, it'll take care of itself. That's just the way the market. It's just and fitting, just like all the poor people deserve to be poor because, they lost the game of richness. Of course, I'm not saying that. I don't even think that those guys are saying that. It's more an issue of anytime there's a problem. It's not an issue of, oh, I'm denying that there's a problem of crowding or that population won't be a problem. Of course, 100 trillion people. Yeah, the Earth could literally, no way could it support that. It probably could not support 1 trillion, and probably half a trillion's too many. And, I don't know exactly where that line is. I'm just saying that it's beyond 10 billion. And, anytime you have a problem, you can disagree on how you see that problem, and that'll change what solution you want. Let's say you have a house and it floods every couple of years at this house. 3 foot of water you get in your house. So what's the problem? Well, maybe you're living in the wrong place. Okay. Or maybe you just haven't built your house to be flood proof. Maybe you should build it on concrete piers, 10 feet tall. There's a guy, I think it was in Louisiana, but maybe Georgia or something. Anyway, some guy is in a floodplain, and it flooded a few years ago, and there was just a flood, I think, last year, and he actually put pontoons on his house and hooked his house from its foundation so it was just on posts, could move up and down and be, wouldn't move laterally, and put pontoons on. The water comes through, house floats, water goes away, house goes back down, minimal damage, you're all set. And that's kind of the thing, I don't believe that don't build houses in California because there's earthquakes. No, build houses strong enough to handle earthquakes. Don't build houses in a floodplain because of flood. No, build houses that are strong enough to handle floods. Don't build houses in Kansas because of tornadoes. It's like, no, build houses that can, withstand a tornado, at least keep the people safe, even if the house has to be ripped away. Build to your environment. Okay? Our environment now is we're going to have 10 billion people on this planet, and the solution has to be that we need to build to that. Okay? And that's what the dispute is about. It's not about is there a problem of crowding and stuff. Now, when we get in the conversation into that, like for example, a morbid atheist who did return, but then we get a much more practical dispute on this issue. He simply thinks it'll be easier to get people to stop having children than it will to teach them how to feed themselves and have clean water. I totally disagree. I think the human nature is that people want to learn how to do those other things, and they don't want to learn how to never have children. Now, couldn't they have less children? Should they have less children? Yeah, they should. But see, here's the thing. I don't think we have to go and have a law or do that first. I think once we give them or help them get for themselves the ability to keep electrical systems running and clean water systems and a decent legal system, law and order and whatnot, that they just won't want to have as many kids. I believe that the pressures in their culture are one of the things generating them to have a lot of kids. I mean, the fact that if they have their kids, they can use that labor at a very young age, if they're ag people, and at a very young age, even if they're going to send those kids off to a factory, that's why it makes sense for them to have more and more kids, okay? If you educate people and they're living off of their intellect, which includes, all the jobs that we have in a modern society, even ones that you think are brute or menial labor, but they're using their intellect to find these jobs and to execute them in a civil society. It's just not of a benefit to have tons of kids in that situation. And, I think that's the difference. If you just try to make them have less kids when they're using their kids as labor to survive, then you're saying take away this tool to survive. And you're going, oh, but it's making it harder for the whole world to survive. Well, maybe you should go because they actually need those kids. So I would say better is give these people ways to survive And when I say give, I hate saying that because, that was another thing I was saying. We can feed the world. I'm not saying we'll go feed the world as an act of charity. We are the world. We can feed ourselves. 10 billion of us can feed us. And we need to have, clean water and electricity, including the parts of the we that are not here where I am, but are in Africa or Asia or wherever. So that's really the issue, is how we are posing the problem. Um, and I just think that the whole idea of worrying, of saying there's too many people, has a sort of a very non-liberal angle to it. It comes, I believe, from this non-liberal idea that the rabble just reproduce too quickly. All they're doing out there is just fucking and fucking, and they're just creating all this scummy rabble. And that is the picture to me that has us say that, ooh, we have an overpopulation problem. And one final thing is how important this difference in perspectives can be. Because to be serious is very, I don't know what the word would be, but disappointed or disliking of my position on this, which is fine. I mean, as a general thing, it's good that we don't agree all the time. But this is a very serious issue, and potentially quite important. And we have this serious difference, and yet, Tubi, you said that the planet probably could comfortably support 6 or 7 billion, and that's how many there are now. So we're not overpopulated. You agree with me. We're under efficient. We could make a better living environment for 7 billion people, and we're not. And I think one reason we don't is because so many people think, well, you can't. If you want to keep your DVD and your Netflix account, then you got to starve those people in Africa because there's just too many of them. See, so I think that the idea that there's not too many, but there's too little food over there is a much more liberal attitude, because it implies that, oh, maybe if we can give them the seed capital to start their own banks, they can do these things. Not that that's necessarily the right way to go about it. I mean, these are, in terms of what particular program should you start, I mean, those are difficult, and we should take all the data in. I actually think that the place to start is clean water. Not really as an act of charity, but almost as an act of charity in the sense that we're not going to profit, we're not going to make money off of those wells. But we should be going to villages, village by village, building wells. They're not expensive. Putting an endowment in place for somebody to take care of the wells. And that would be step one. Step two is doing a similar thing with relatively low power systems. But be that as it may, those particulars, those are subject to people that know Africa really well. Well, where would you go first, and how would you do it, and where would the governments be helpful? Where could you go and be sure that the local government wouldn't just take all of your funds to build, wells and, I don't know, build substandard wells that failed. All of those particulars would be very important. But in the end, yeah, I think it's going to be a lot easier to teach people the technologies they need to feed themselves efficiently and modernize themselves in ways acceptable to them. Not necessarily exactly the way we've modernized ourselves, but at least having these basic infrastructures of life, like clean water, not having to drink surface water, than it is to teach them to not have children. I mean, yeah, you can teach them to use condoms and whatnot, but if they actually want children, because the children are helping the stability of their family by adding, a body that can work, it's not that, it doesn't matter if you give them condoms and they know how it works. They still need those children. So if you educate them, though, they're less likely to want those children, and less likely to have them. And also, if you have somebody that really wants 6 kids, if we have the natural costs associated with that, just motivating or unmotivating that action, then fine, somebody could have 6 kids, and they'll have that instead of vacations every year or something. I mean, it'll be a trade-off that they're making. And you won't have masses of people making that trade-off, and you won't have to have a growth of population forever. So just for the record, yes, I do believe we should do things to steady off population. I think the main thing we can do is bring our infrastructure up so that we can support 10 billion people. And if we do that, then by the time we reach 10 billion people, we'll find a lot less of this intense population growth among the impoverished.